Hello and welcome to Global Review. This is our weekly program bringing to you key developments in the global horizon, trying to capture how the world is bringing in terms of broad trends. Let us have a look at the headlines. Europe, China, Russia discuss new deal for Iran. US-China trade truce emerges, more dialogue to deepen. Trump reassures North Korea's ken. The idea is to have peace in the region. European Council sees trade deal with Mercosur maybe by end of the year. Brazil calls for Japan-South America economic partnership. Low-cost air link WOW between India, Europe and North America to come up soon. African Development Bank to hold its annual meeting, this time in South Korea. As you recall, the last one was in Ahmedabad. The informal summit concludes. Modi-Putin comes up with Sochi declaration. Several issues this week, and we would be bringing to you across the globe more stories in terms of how the last 4 years foreign policy was. Let's have a look at across the globe. Today we would have a rather deeper discussion on how the last 4 years were. The resilient foreign policy, one of the key issues in which Prime Minister Modi has taken a lot of interest in terms of deepening his larger emphasis on how to have external sector connect for domestic economic growth and how you bring in domestic economic growth with neighborhood first policy. And there are several stories to discuss. There are several dimensions of it to discuss. Let's first have a look at this report.
On May 26, the incumbent government led by Prime Minister Narendra Modi will complete its 4th anniversary. During his tenure, the Prime Minister has expanded India's global footprints by strengthening old ties and garnering new relationships. External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj brought in the aspect of diplomacy with human face. In the last 4 years, the interest showcased by Prime Minister Modi and his cabinet has infused dynamism in our foreign policy. President, Vice President and the Speaker have also contributed to furthering India's interests globally. Various state governments, in spirit of cooperative federalism, were inspired to interact with foreign governments. India's renewed focus towards foreign policy is five-pronged. Neighborhood First Policy. Bilateral relations have been reinvigorated through Neighborhood First Policy. In fact, Prime Minister Modi had invited all South Asian heads of states for his swearing-in ceremony in 2014. He believed in SAARC but then had to shift his focus towards Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multi-Sectoral Technical and Economic Cooperation BIMSTEC and Bangladesh, Bhutan, Nepal, India BIBIN groupings. Line of credits of worth more than $8 billion have been sanctioned by Indian government over the last 4 years towards various development projects, apart from close to 2,000 training slots and various hydroelectric power buyback agreements with our neighboring countries. Promoting regional connectivity. Regional groupings were also high on the agenda of Prime Minister Modi's foreign policy. Groupings like Shanghai Cooperation Organization, BRICS, ASEAN, India-Africa Forum Summit, Forum for India-Pacific Islands Cooperation and East Asia Summit process have elevated our interactions with the wider world along with forays in New Development Bank and Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank. India also hosted African Development Bank's annual meeting in Gandhinagar in 2017 and AIIB's annual meeting is slated to be held in Mumbai on June 25 to 26, 2018. Faith in multilateralism. India's long-standing belief in multilateralism has been further concretized by renewing partnership with the United Nations and other international organizations like World Bank, International Monetary Fund and the World Trade Organization. India's leadership role during the negotiation processes of Sustainable Development Goals and Addis Ababa Action Agenda both in 2015 have been hailed as major successes by the global community. PM Modi's initiative of International Solar Alliance is also a global winner. Idea of one world. In an age when the world is divided into narrow domestic walls with impending gloom of protectionism, Prime Minister Modi's foreign policy believes in the concept of one world and mutual welfare. India's development cooperation activities through South-South cooperation have continued to empower and assist the Global South. In doing so, India has continued to partner and cooperate with Global North to help develop the Global South. Triangular cooperation with countries like UK, Germany, France and Japan are bringing development to various African and Asian countries. Promoting commerce, connectivity and culture. Prime Minister Modi and External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj's focus has also been towards effectively engaging the Indian diaspora and leveraging India's soft power. Be it India being the first responder in crisis and humanitarian assistance, for example in Nepal earthquake and Sri Lankan floods, to External Affairs Minister personally overseeing help for Indians in distress in a foreign country. Encouraging the world community to celebrate June 21 as International Yoga Day, to spreading the knowledge of India's traditional medicine has been the forte of the government. Prime Minister Modi's proactive engagements with the Indian diaspora through various town hall interactions during his foreign visits have been effective as well. Apart from these 5 major initiatives, India has carefully mentored the global and diplomatic slugfest by avoiding ideological positioning. Thus, we have crafted differentiated relationships with countries that are strategically opposite to each other. We have strengthened and maintained meaningful relations with Israel and Palestine, Saudi Arabia and Qatar, and US and China. Prime Minister's initiative of informal summits with Chinese leader Xi Jinping and Russian leader Vladimir Putin is considered to be a trend-setting outreach in international diplomacy.
Last 4 years, India has more to move forward with. In last 4 years, India has achieved under the leadership of the Prime Minister Modi several areas in which we now have to build on and have to see where country stands. To take a look back on last 4 years, it would not be easy. As the report showed, there are 3 areas of broad emphasis where India has tried to bring in greater niche areas, greater convergence, culture, commerce and connectivity. The 3 have emerged as important dimensions. The neighborhood first policy, the idea of having faith in globalization, but also emphasizing on multilateralism. But in this whole process, the key objective is to ensure domestic economic growth, to have more jobs and to have a sort of larger base of people contributing to not only the larger cause of the globalism of one world, but also trying to bring in and extrapolating what Prime Minister has been saying, Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas. So, trying to bring that on larger platform. To discuss several of these issues today, we are very fortunate to have a very rich panel. We have Dr. Vijay Chauthaiwale, somebody who has been part of shaping up of several of these foreign visits of the Prime Minister. We are also joined by prominent journalist Shri Venkatnarayan with us today, and of course Professor Sreeram Chaullia, who is very often with us on international affairs and a key commentator on several of these developments. So, Dr. Vijay Chauthaiwale, let me first turn to you. How you look at last 4 years, in what way you think India's foreign policy has moved in some specific directions?
I think last 4 years were quite remarkable as far as foreign policy is concerned in several ways. And I will give you only 4 points to begin the discussion. First is that India has reached a lot of unreached countries so far, and there are many countries where Indian Prime Minister or head of the government has never visited, like countries like Mongolia, Israel, and there are several other countries where for decades Indian Prime Minister has not gone, including Canada and neighborhood countries like Nepal, Bangladesh. And Prime Minister has covered a lot of this gap in last 4 years. Second is that the civilizational connect is also another important part of his foreign policy. And connected to it, that also a very large outreach he has done with the diaspora.
Yeah.
And in all that, he has worked independently with each country based on Indian interest. So, that means he has worked Palestine separately than Israel.
Yeah.
Similarly, he has worked with Saudi Arabia, and at the same time he has also worked with Iran. So, these are some of these balancing these global dynamics very aptly is I guess it's one of the major achievements of Modi's foreign policy.
Mr. Venkatarayan, how you look at this very dimension of reaching out to diaspora as a new vibrant arm of the foreign policy. If you recall, immediately after independence, Kaka Kalekar was sent on a mission by Pandit Nehru to see what is the state of affairs with our diaspora, particularly in African countries. And a major report came out immediately after the crisis in Ghana and Ethiopia deepened in early 50s. Since then, India has moved a long way. During NDA 1, it was Vajpayee ji's government that we came up with the idea of having a separate ministry. But how you look at last 4 years?
Well, you know, the diaspora has emerged as a very powerful community. We now have 30 million or 3 crores of people living in more than 150 countries, and their estimated total assets are something like $400 billion, which is equivalent to our current foreign exchange reserves. And the Prime Minister, Mr. Vajpayee, was the first to appreciate this, and he had the Singhvi Committee report, and then started this Pravasi Bharatiya Divas and all that, and he kept it going. And he makes it a point to address the Indian community in wherever he goes on the planet. And in the last 71 years, Sachin, the kind of diplomatic activity that has been going on during Mr. Modi's regime has never really happened.
Yeah,
I'll give you some statistics.
Yeah.
He has made 36 foreign trips so far, visited 54 countries, and attended 25 international summit meetings, and he has more than 100 presidents and prime ministers visited India during the last 4 years. And Sushma Swaraj, the External Affairs Minister, would have met practically all the foreign ministers of countries which are members of the United Nations.
Yeah.
I don't think this has happened
ever before
in our history so far,
Yeah.
except the United States. Hillary Clinton was fond of boasting, I've been to 100 countries and that kind of stuff. But no other leader or no other foreign minister would have done the kind of thing that the Indian foreign minister and Indian prime minister have done. This is absolutely remarkable. The way, we invited all the African heads of government for the Indo-Africa Forum. And then you have the ASEAN meetings.
Yeah, that's right.
And the Pacific Islands meeting. My God, you name it, these guys have done it. And
Excellent.
then ACT Asia, East Asia Summit. And then, practically, I don't think there is any country or, any area on the planet which has not been touched either by the Indian Prime Minister or External Affairs Minister or one of the 2 ministers of state or Commerce Minister or anything, which is absolutely remarkable on its own.
We would have to stop here for a break, and after the break the discussion would continue. Please don't go away. Welcome back. Our review of 4 years foreign policy of India under Prime Minister Narendra Modi continues. The larger context of this foreign policy between bilateral, multilateral and regional, Sreeram Chaullia, is not absolutely about our bilaterals. It is also about the larger geopolitics. And this has triggered in several reactions across many other capitals than in Delhi alone. How you look at this, what Dr. Vijay Chauthaiwale mentioned or Mr. Venkatarayan mentioned in terms of this intense sort of interactions that Prime Minister or the External Affairs Minister had?
Yeah, Sachin, I think Narendra Modi had a very big vision when he came into power for resurrecting India's role in the world and to make us a problem solver and what we call a provider of net public goods, security, prosperity, and to position India as what he calls a leading power in the world. And I think to a great extent that has been achieved in these 4 years, because what he has done is his personal attention, as we have mentioned, the political leadership he gave to foreign policy had been missing for a long time. You mentioned Pandit Nehru. After the 1950s, there was never a prime minister who paid this level of attention and saw the value in engaging with the rest of the world. It was mostly preoccupied by domestic politics and narrower issues. So what Prime Minister has done is, I think he has really played the role of a global statesman. And you mentioned Solar Alliance, Yoga Day, just to to highlight a few things. And then on the geostrategic side also, he has shown a sharpness in dealing with major national security threats. We can talk about the surgical strikes. We can talk about the resolution, the strategic resolve we showed for Doklam when we were facing a major threat. So I think he has been able to navigate what is actually becoming a multipolar world, where India should be a power center in itself rather than a swing state. My own theory is that Narendra Modi's major contribution, we'll remember historically, 10 years, 15 years down the line, is he changed us from being a swing state that was oscillating between China and United States or Soviet Union and United States to becoming a third power center in its own right with its own set of followers.
We would come back to this, Sreeram, because I think one important obsession that now foreign policy has done away with is Pakistan. Always our media, our discussions, our ideas, they used to hover around Pakistan. But Dr. Vijay Chauthaiwale, I wanted to ask you another question. Last year we were president of BRICS, and several around more than 100 meetings were done. And what we heard from media and other places, Prime Minister's emphasis was that all these meetings should happen outside Delhi. And if you see the tier 2 cities, tier 3 cities, their number of hosting international events, it has multiplied. It has leapfrogged in several cases. After Delhi, people either used to go to Bangalore or to Kolkata at the most. Mumbai had some business meetings, but that's no more the case. Nasik, Pune, Bhopal, you would see Ahmedabad, several meetings. So what is the Prime Minister's idea behind this? Is this an effort to connect larger public, also orient towards global affairs? Absolutely. What is the idea?
Absolutely, because see, at the end he is the people's Prime Minister. So he always looked at how people will know, understand, comprehend, and also be a part of any of his initiative, whether it's domestic or it's international agenda. And that is why he wants to take everything out of Delhi, out of Lieutenant's circle, and go to the people so that they understand what is the importance of this. For example, in Ahmedabad, because I stayed there for a long time, when Mr. Netanyahu visited Ahmedabad, there were people standing on both the sides for almost 5 kilometers. No one expected that. So that there is so much curiosity about Israel in Gujarat, though there is a lot of connection between, there are a lot of Jews who settled in Gujarat for a long period of time, but this is the kind of connect he could revive, and that's, I guess, the uniqueness of Prime Minister Modi's.
Mr. Venkataran, this whole idea of balancing between two extreme pillars in diplomacy is always seen as a tightrope walk, and people always appreciate leadership. And this is a miracle that Prime Minister Modi has accomplished in last 4 years. You see polarizing opinions on various dimensions in the climate change negotiations, for instance, at multilateral level, developing versus developed country, and then PM comes up with the idea of environmental justice, the idea of going beyond equator, so doing away with north-south divide, and then coming up with some constructive suggestion, as Sreeram suggested. So that dimension, or the idea of Palestine-Israel, which India had some, but not to the extent that we have now with Israel. We have opened up new avenues for our cooperation with Israel. So we were having this tightrope walk, of course, with India having relations with Israel and Palestine, but we never deepened relations with Israel. That has happened now. Even in West Asia, PM could achieve, nobody could have thought of a temple in that area. Things have moved, and everybody is on board. Even the efforts that were required in terms of having balance with China vis-a-vis United States or Russia vis-a-vis United States, So, how you look at some of these new dimensions of our foreign policy?
Sachin, 1,000 years ago, India used to account for 25% of the global GDP. Then came India's enslavement by the empire builders, the British and others. And we, during the 400 years of the British stay in this country, we have been reduced to paupers practically. Now, we have a prime minister who is trying to change things. And this is for 1,000 years, India always hit below its weight. Now, we are trying to regain our position. After all, every fifth human being on the planet is an Indian. Okay, you know about India, a dozen people of Indian origin are either presidents or prime ministers in different parts of the world. Okay, and very soon there might be an Indian who could be sitting in the White House. Just you. So the thing is, I'm very happy that finally we have a leader with a positive outlook. India doesn't have to be, I don't know if you remember once when Mrs. Gandhi went to America, a reporter asked her, ma'am, are you pro-Soviet or pro-American? She said, I am neither. If I am anything, I am pro-Indian. This is what Mr. Modi is trying to say. India is a country that matters in global affairs. And we are trying to play the kind of role that befits an emerging power. Right?
Yeah, and there Sreeram, I come to you. As Mr. Venkatnarayan mentioned, I am pro-India. That's the message Prime Minister Modi has given, or India first. But last 1 month, there were several reports that India's relations with neighborhood has gone down again. And within last 1 month, picture has changed.
Yeah,
so this magic wind that Prime Minister has, wherever he goes, things change. What happened in Nepal, people were criticizing all this while Nepal has gone out of hand and things like that. But now, day after tomorrow, he would be meeting Prime Minister of Bangladesh. He already had meeting with Nepal, and Sri Lanka was here with the ISA. And so this dimension of our neighborhood, which is a very, I would say, extremely challenging for any government to have balance all the time. How you see our relations with our neighborhood?
I think, Sachin, that's been another major milestone contribution of Prime Minister Modi. Because if you see, when we came into power 2014, there had been tremendous neglect of our own neighbors. And he reversed that process, see, with consistent engagement. I'll give you a couple of big highlights, for the audience to understand. You remember when he came into power, he met Sheikh Hasina, and he said, "Aap mujh par bharosa rakhiye. We will do the land boundary agreement," and it happened. It had been stuck for 45 years. Exactly. And you ask people in Bangladesh, they say only Modi could do it because he had that political capital, the gravitas and the leadership in India to carry all the sections with him. So in that sense, he's, the South Asian satellite. He promised in 2014-15, delivered in 2017. And it is benefiting all the member countries except the Western neighbor who doesn't want to be part of the development partnership. So SAARC -1. Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal, BBIN concept, Ramayana Trail, and then further to ASEAN towards, our ACT East, which is an improvement over Look East. If you add up all these, South Asia, Southeast Asia, Central Asia also, the connect for energy and all these things. So I think we have gone a long distance.
This is extremely fascinating.
And when it came to pressure, Sachin, he has been managing this balance very well, we mentioned. We have not bowed to anybody's pressure. We will continue to work with Iran, we'll continue to work with Russia, and that's what he's showing, that India first means we put our interests above anything else, and we are fearless.
Exactly, this richness of the Indian foreign policy, what kind of inspiration, what kind of imprint we see on our foreign policy of the Prime Minister, and that's the issue we are going to pick up in our next section, Book of the Week. And in this week, we have picked up 2 books, and 2 authors are here with us. The idea is Modi Doctrine. The question really is, after Gujral Doctrine, Here are two publications which are trying to bring out some details, some facets of Prime Minister Modi's foreign policy, and they have captured it as Modi Doctrine, which came up in August 2006, edited by, among others, by Dr. Vijay Chauthaiwale. And the second book came up in September 2016, that was also called Modi Doctrine, by Professor Sreeram Chaullia. Let me first turn to Dr. Vijay Chauthaiwale, who edited the volume along with Uttam Kumar Sinha and Anirban Ganguly. What is the unique selling point for this publication, Dr. Chauthaiwale?
See, in the very first 2 years, Prime Minister Modi has taken a lot of initiatives with respect to foreign policy right from the beginning of his swearing-in ceremony. So, that time we thought to take a comprehensive review of this, but we being a part of a political system, we thought that let independent experts, including someone like Sreeram, should take a review of it. So, this book is essentially an assessment by the independent authors.
Yeah.
Many of them, around 10 or 11 who are outside India, and they have taken one comprehensive review of
Excellent.
2 years of foreign policy.
Sreeram, half a minute, tell us about your publication.
No, Modi Doctrine, the idea is we have lacked doctrines that combine a global vision and globalism and liberalism along with a sharp sense of realpolitik. And I have shown in this book that actually it is possible to combine the two. I call it a realistic liberalism, and that's what Narendra Modi's policy stands for. That's why our stature has risen so much in the last 4 years. I'll just give you one stat. The UBS, the Swiss bank, is saying the FDI coming into this country is going to be around $75 to $80 billion for the next 5 years. Provided Prime Minister Modi's leadership continues. So, we are talking about a quantum leap that has happened. Foreign economic diplomacy, geopolitics, multilateralism in all spheres. I think we have
Thank you.
achieved, and we
Thanks,
need to support
Sreeram.
this.
Our time is up. Dear viewers, as you would agree, 4 years to be reviewed in one episode is simply impossible. We have tried to do something in this episode. Maybe we would capture some facets and remaining facets in the next episode. Continue to watch this program. Thank you.